Alright, I have something really exciting to share with you that the Lord revealed to me, and it pertains to the Feast of Tabernacles. There's something very significant about the Rapture and Resurrection which I'd like to tell you and share with you. I think you'll be very excited. From the Transfiguration, when the disciples, after 6 days, ascended up the mountain, Jesus, who was standing there alive, who had never died, suddenly was transformed and transfigured into a glorious state. It's a picture of the rapture. They met with the Lord on the 7th day of the Feast of Tabernacles. Then after that, the cloud covered them. Simon Peter, James and John, and Messiah Yeshua. And in the cloud appeared Moses and Elijah. And what did they discuss? The death, burial, and resurrection of the Messiah, who's the first fruits of the resurrection. So I realized that you have right there a picture of the rapture of living believers who've never died, and they're suddenly transformed, translated, and go up in the cloud to meet the Lord in the air. And you have the picture later of the resurrection of the dead in Messiah Yeshua, who is the first fruits of the resurrection. So then, following him are those that are his that have died. So that explains why the dead believers are resurrected first before the living believers are taken up. Because he was the first one to rise from the dead. And those that come after him that are his that have died in him will rise first. And then we who are alive, just like he was standing there alive, are transfigured to be in our glorified state into his likeness. Just as it says here in 2 Corinthians 3:18. We will be transformed into his likeness with ever-increasing glory. And 1 Corinthians 15:53 will be transformed into bodies that will never die. As the disciples went back down the mountain, they questioned what rising from the dead meant. But Messiah Yeshua told them not to tell anyone until it happened. And this all happened after 6 days, meaning that it happened on the 7th day of the Feast of Tabernacles. And remember that Simon Peter said, "Lord, it's good for us to be here. Do you want me to build 3 sukkahs? One for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah?" So, when Moses ascended Mount Sinai, it was after 6 days that he entered the cloud and saw and heard the Lord speaking face to face with him in a glorified state. So the Lord spoke to him out of the cloud on the 7th day. It says, when Moses went up on the mountain, the cloud covered it, and the glory of the Lord settled on Mount Sinai. For 6 days the cloud covered the mountain, and on the 7th day of the Feast of Tabernacles, the Lord called to Moses from within the cloud. Now remember, during another Feast of Tabernacles, Messiah Yeshua refused to go up to the feast. And his brothers told him, if you're doing these things, go and present yourself in the temple so that the whole world can follow you, so that the whole world will see you. And instead he said, no, I'm not going up to the feast. Instead, he went up secretly in a hidden fashion, only appearing to those who followed him. And he went up in the middle of the feast. Now, we've talked about the last day as probably being Yom Kippur. But what if it is the Feast of Tabernacles? Because it was on the last day of the Feast of Tabernacles. And it says in John 7:37, on the last day of the feast, the great day, Jesus stood up and cried, let all who thirst come to me. What if the last day is the last day of the Feast of Tabernacles? Because Yeshua was obviously revealing during his transfiguration, he was picturing the rapture and the resurrection of the dead. We also have this statement in Job 19:25, "For I know that my Redeemer lives, and in the last day I shall rise out of the earth." John also heard the voice of the Lord, and he was told to come up hither. And the two witnesses hear the voice, and they're taken up and ascend up in the cloud. So right there at the Transfiguration, Messiah Yeshua pictured the rapture and then the resurrection of the dead. And he did it on the last day of the Feast of Tabernacles, or Sukkot. Now remember that Yeshua promised the believers in, I think it's John 14, where he said, "I go to prepare a place for you, that where I am, there you may be also. If it were not so, I would have told you." And remember what happened with Martha and Jesus, Yeshua, in John 11:24, when Jesus was asking her if she believed that her brother would rise again. She had said, "Lord, if you'd been here, my brother would not have died." Telling her that statement, that those who live and believe in me will never die. Believe thou this? He was talking about the very thing he demonstrated, that the living will never die. And then he asked her if she believed this, and then she said, "Well, Lord, I believe he'll rise again at the last day." So he was presenting to Martha the idea of the rapture and then the resurrection at the last day. The rapture and the resurrection, just like he did at the Transfiguration. He was alive and was changed and never died. And then he died and rose again in the resurrection. But I suddenly realized that the reason why the dead are resurrected first is because he was the first fruits of the resurrection, and it says, "And then those who are Messiahs will rise after him." So that's why they're resurrected next. They go up, it's the reverse order of the Transfiguration. So those who are Christ rise first, the dead, and they go up. And then those who are living, who've never died, are transformed and changed into their glorified bodies. And it's just absolutely stunning to see this for the first time. So incredible. This is the biggest story that demonstrates these two amazing pieces of the puzzle of the blessed hope. This is absolutely the most exciting thing that the Lord's shown me in a while. And if you read my book, The Almond Tree, Aaron's Rod, the Messiah King of Israel, I go into a lot more detail about the events with Moses and the disciples at the Transfiguration. And it's really astonishing what God revealed to me. And you can buy my book at olivepresspublisher.com. It would really help me out. Isn't this the most incredible truth you've heard in a long time? Thank you, Lord, for revealing this to me, and I now share it with people so their hope is restored and renewed. We don't know when it will be, if it's going to be at the last trump or if it's going to be at the last day pertaining to tabernacles, but at least we can be watching, right? And we are excited